Welcome back to Never Did It, Season 3. Ladies, wow. I'm Jake Ziegler, and I'm here with Brad Garoon. On Never Did It, we look back at the last 100 plus years of movie history in an effort to fill in some of our own movie blind spots. And today we're covering the 1960s, and we're joined by Professor Jeff Richardson, making was this fifth or sixth appearance on the show?
Sixth.
Yeah, sixth.
Sixth now?
We talked about his SNL jacket on the last episode he was on.
That's right.
Well, welcome back. It's good to have you. Thanks for joining us. We've got a couple of really interesting movies, and Brad, I can't remember, since I hadn't seen either of these movies, which one did I pick and which one did you pick?
Well, you picked Daisies. Tell us why that might have happened.
I have no memory of why I did that. I think I was just looking at, the list that you had sent me, and it looked like it was pretty popular and well rated amongst the movies, and it sounded, I would say, experimental a little bit, and I think that's exactly kind of what happened. Other than, just kind of looking at the rating on Letterboxd, I wasn't familiar with it or the director or really anything like that. I just thought it might be an interesting watch.
Well, that's for certain. Jeff, you had not seen Daisies before.
No, I had seen Daisies. I'd seen both films for this episode, so I was excited to rewatch both of them because I'd only seen each of them once. I will say, I don't know if we're saving it. I mean, the other film we're going to talk about was probably the reason I was really drawn to this episode, but I thought, Daisies. I would always kind of curious if I should give that another rewatch because it's such a, as we're going to discuss, it's a strange movie. I mean, it's unlike a lot of other things. So I was excited to revisit it.
Well, okay, so what is it? It's sort of it's interesting. I was looking at a list of like just psychedelic films, and there's one cited from 1948, but I think maybe not really. This is kind of, I think, the first psychedelic film, or the first one that like maybe a lot of people have seen. And it was also
not even considered that. That's historically, right. I mean, that's fascinating, yeah.
And then it was considered by some to be the launch of the Czechoslovakian New Wave. There are a lot of weird movies that have come out of Czechoslovakia, but this one is, as it was known then, Czechoslovakia. If this is about anything, it's two girls running amok, abusing the affections of men, and also symbols related to their genitalia in sometimes very beautiful settings. First off, the preservation of this movie is really incredible. Especially, I thought the sepia tone, it flashes between different color, as you would think for a psychedelic movie. It flashes between black and white and very vivid or ultra unrealistic colors, also color, and then sepia tone. I thought the sepia tone shots looked so almost 3D on my television. There was so much depth. But there's no narrative. Both of the girls are named Maria, and they don't really have characters outside of being wild. And in the end, they get blown up by Allied forces, German forces. I don't know, there's World War II footage at the beginning and end of this movie.
A chandelier, maybe?
Right. A chandelier does fall on them, but then there's a massive explosion. You cannot spoil this movie. So, Jeff, you've seen it before, so you've at least had some time to think about it. What do you make of this movie?
Well, I had forgotten a lot of it, but I just kind of remembered like they just kind of have like a food fight, and it's just kind of like there's not a plot, and it's kind of anarchic. Running amok is kind of what my memory of it. A lot of the stuff I'd totally forgotten. I forgot that they kept going on dates with like middle-aged rich men and like kind of driving them crazy and acting all weird. And I forgot a lot of the bedroom stuff, cutting up pickles and sausages. I wonder what that means. But so my expectations were pretty, I don't want to say low because I don't remember disliking it, but I remember thinking the first time I saw it, like, okay, that was like crazy, but like not really for me. I didn't really get much out of it. I'm probably never watch that again. And I think as time passed and I'd kind of forgotten it a little bit, I'd see the title mentioned now and then, and I'd think, actually, maybe I would like to see that again. So like I said before, when I saw it on the list paired with our other film, I thought, Daisies, like I could check that out. I really enjoyed it the second time around. I have to say, I'm actually kind of shocked. I wasn't expecting to like it that much because I didn't like it that much the first time. I just thought, like, let me just remind myself what this even is. And this is going to be a weird comparison, but the thing that really popped into my head, like even while I was watching the movie, because I was surprised to find myself enjoying it so much, is a very different film, but it's almost the same time period, just a few years later, an American movie that's also famous and part of a movement, which is Easy Rider. Because the first time I saw Easy Rider, which is really, there's not much of a plot, it's just two hippies driving across America, they're going to discover America, and then make it to Mardi Gras. And that's that's probably more plot than Daisies has, but it's still not much of a plot. And I kind of hated it the first time I saw it, and more than I disliked Daisies. I was literally like, Easy Rider sucks, that's bullshit. And then like 10 years went by, and then I rewatched it again with pretty low expectations. And I was like, actually, I don't love this movie, but I kind of dig it. Like, it's like, knowing that it doesn't have a plot going in, that it's just kind of like hippie BS of them driving, but it's just cool rock, cool soundtrack in a moment. It's very sort of like, was a huge deal in its time. And I just kind of dug it. And I've watched it maybe once or twice since then. I've watched scenes from it multiple times. So now I'm kind of like, yeah, Easy Rider. I dig Easy Rider. And I suddenly, when I was halfway through Daisies, I thought, oh my gosh, it's another Easy Rider. Like, I kind of like blew it off the first time because I was just kind of like, this doesn't have a plot. It's kind of boring me. It's just too weird. But the second time around, I think, just even though I'd forgotten a lot of it, I kind of knew, like, okay, it's kind of avant-garde, there's no story, and I saw it was only 75 minutes. I thought, oh, I forgot it was so short. So when I was just halfway through, I was like, I can't believe I'm already 40 minutes in. I'm having a blast. Like, it's anarchic. The quality, to get to Brad's point, of the images looked so good. And I honestly watched it on YouTube. Like, somebody uploaded the whole thing on YouTube, and it was HD, and it looked amazing. The back and forth between color and sepia, the different tinted sepia tones and the black and white. I mean, it just looked gorgeous, and the music was really effective for me. I just thought it had an energy that I totally missed out on the first time. I didn't really I don't know, I just didn't remember it being like this really kind of fun. I mean, I guess I remembered that, but I didn't remember having so much fun. And this time, again, it's not kind of like Easy Rider. I'm not going to call it one of my favorite films or anything, but I dig it. I totally was like on board. I had a good time. I'm not sure what to make of it exactly. I mean, I don't think some of its themes are pretty obvious. The anti-patriarchy stuff with, cutting pickles and using older men to, get fancy meals and drinks and things. And then just obviously I guess there's a real anti-rich thing with having a huge feast at the end and sort of destroying everything in that nice room. I don't know much about the history of the Czechoslovakia back then in the 60s, so I don't know much about what was going on, but there's probably some sort of political, commentary as well, which, would be over my head without doing some research.
Before we move on to something, I kind of want to take it back to just the beginning. When you first saw Daisies, what was the draw to it at that point? Because, like I said, I wasn't familiar with this movie like at all.
I think it was, I just knew of its reputation as being like, the seminal Czech new wave film. I used to work in a film library for almost a decade, so I was very familiar with like the DVD cover. It was just one that came back and forth for film classes a lot to the study center where I worked, though I'd never seen it. And I think it was just on like if you remember, like before the Criterion Channel, there was this service called Filmstruck. I think I watched it. I could be wrong, but I think I watched it on Filmstruck. So that was probably close to 10 years ago now, or maybe just under. And it was just kind of part of probably some collection they had. And I thought, yeah, let me check it out. I don't really know. That's the best of my memory. It was about a decade ago, and I just threw it on. I probably saw it with 75 minutes and thought, yeah, that's always exciting for me. As someone who really drags his heels when I see that 3-hour mark for a movie, I'm like, oh, it's incredibly historically important and everyone loves it, but 3 hours. Do I really want to do that right now? And then, I never do it.
Jake and I both watched a 3-hour movie for next week's episode.
3 hour plus.
Yeah, right.
It's 3 hours 20. Yeah.
Is this perhaps the number one film on the Sight and Sound poll?
It is.
Yeah. I considered volunteering to go on that episode also instead of this episode, because I was I would also kind of always wonder if I'd ever rewatch that movie. I watched it once in grad school, and I honestly kind of hated it, and so my memory is kind of hating it, even though it's obviously the greatest film of all time according to people who know a lot more than me. So I was like, maybe I should revisit it someday, but I wasn't brave enough.
We'll get into that more next week. One thing we didn't say, and this is so typical of us, given that this is our first Ladies Wow episode where we have a non-lady guest, but we didn't mention the name of the director of this film. Oh. So this was directed by, and I'm going to pronounce this wrong, even though I went back and watched the commentary track on this movie because I needed a little help. The commentary track offered very, very little in terms of help. Before I'm going to hedge on saying the director's name for a second, just so I can mention, Criterion also did a not very Ladies Wow thing. The audio commentary was by Daniel Bird and Peter Hames, two British guys, one of whom is very old. But this movie was directed by a woman named Věra Chytilová. And I guess all of her, I was just looking on Letterboxd, and it seems like most of her movies are avant-garde. Even like she made a horror movie. That one even seems kind of like far out. It's about kids on a ski lodge getting killed by or being tortured or something by some force. But then she has these other, I don't know, it all sounds pretty experimental. I can't say I hated this. We get a lot of hate comments on YouTube for our opinions, as anyone who talks about movies would. But one thing that the boomers get really mad at us about is I said some not nice things about Easy Rider, and they came for me.
Did you guys cover that film? I forgot that.
No, we just mentioned it. Someone called it one of their favorite movies of whatever year that was that it came out, and I was like, okay. I think it's very just fine. And I get that it was like this, like, holy crap, we've never seen anything like this before. So in that regard, I totally see the similarities, but I kept comparing it in my mind to The Color of Pomegranates, which is another art film that has very little narrative. They're not the same. That one's not trying to say the same. That one's more like industrial, reminded me a lot of the black and white portions of Twin Peaks. This is more, I mean, if nothing else, this is fun. Right? These people are having fun and they're doing wacky stuff. It's definitely not boring. At one point, they cut each other up with scissors, and you would worry that she would try to be like really edgy with it, but it's really silly and bloodless and goofy, and the seams are there. Like, she wants you to see what the methods are that she's using to do. Like, my hand is over there, but if I move my body, you see all of it moving, and maybe it comes back into frame. I like that it doesn't take itself seriously at all. As far as like Letterboxd goes, I wouldn't know what to do with this, and I was very nervous to talk about it because aside from being like, I wasn't bored, and it looks really, really pretty, and everyone looks like they're having a good time, I don't know what this is. In fact, I don't even know what the class critique is. Like, I don't think it's particularly clear. I know that the movie was conceived as these girls are spoiled rich brats, not these girls are fighting against. I don't know if that's what they went with. I don't know. A Bird on commentary, I think it was basically like, whatever your interpretation is valid. You know, one of those kinds of things.
It's nice of him to allow.
Yeah, right. Thanks, Dad. The only thing that I think is not like super vague is when a hard-boiled egg gets cut in half by a pair of scissors and then eaten. That's all pretty much on the screen.
Yeah.
Jake, what did you like it?
Yeah, yes, with a but, because it was fun though. Like, yeah, so like you said, these people look like they're having fun. That goes a long way for me with movies. Like some movies that are very. This is actually not a good comparison because I actually think this is a really good movie. But I'm getting ready to watch the third Knives Out, so I watched the first Knives Out the other day. Like, that cast looks like they're having the most fun of like any cast in the history of ever. That, you know, can kind of carry movies. So like, and that worked for me with Daisies. Like, these girls look like they're having a great time. Like I said, the locations are cool. It's got this kinetic, frenetic energy, 65, 75 minutes, whatever it is. It's a fun hang, and I definitely compare it to Easy Rider. I think that's a valid comparison, but it's a more fun version of that. Like, Easy Rider is more of a drag. I don't know. It's just so very of the moment and everything, and it's there's an infectious charm to it.
I do want to clarify that this movie didn't remind me of Easy Rider. My reaction to the movie reminded me of my reaction to reviewing Easy Rider, just to, you know, make that clear.
I was gonna say, I guess if Easy Rider didn't have Hicks, like if there was no opposition to what Fonda and Hoffman were doing, then I
don't know. I mean, maybe there are similarities, but really it was more like, this is how I reacted the second time I saw this movie. Same with Easy Rider. Is I was like, oh, now I kind of get it. It's just kind of a vibe, and it's just, you just got to go with it. You know, one thing I did write down. The only thing I didn't take a lot of notes, but the very beginning of the movie. Like, one of the first things they say is, everything's going bad in this world, we're going bad as well. I mean, that's pretty much the thesis statement, right? I mean, it's just like, we're just going to go bad, and we're going to go nuts and kind of do whatever we want. And you just got to go with the vibe there. So,
but then they reform at the end. They still died. Their newspaper costumes were very cool. And for their trouble, they get chandeliered. So... Yeah.
Well, that's what they say. It doesn't matter. They say, you know, now we're doing good. Now we're behaving. Now we're being happy. And then doesn't matter. Chandelier still falls. So
I was watching that back with the commentary. The critics, historians, they were like, and the explosion's coming up. I remember thinking, like, the movie's going to end in like 3 seconds. It doesn't feel like it's ready to end because the only change happens 5 minutes before the end of the movie. It kind of reminded me in that regard. When was the last time either of you watched Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs?
Long time.
I've seen it somewhat recently.
So that movie is like going along, set up, and the climax happens 5 minutes before the end of the movie. Like, it shifts so fast. Yeah. It kind of just felt like the Disney folks were like, oh, this does need an ending, I guess. Here's one, really fast. It kind of reminded me of that kind of pacing, but obviously completely different in its accessibility and also intention. A movie that I thought was much more accessible, and I recommended just because Riley Trahan, actually, who was a guest on our episode for whatever year it was that Cleo from 5 to 7 came out, put this in his top 10 of the year, and he had also recommended Harikiri, and I watched that and thought that was amazing. So this seemed like the way to go. And also, this has been true of the last couple of decades. There are not a lot of American films in this series up to this point because there are not a lot of Hollywood is not letting women, for the most part, direct movies. And through the 50s, there were no Hollywood movies directed by women. Through the 60s, there were no Hollywood movies directed by women. There were a couple indie movies in America directed by women. As we'll talk about more next week, one of the movies we're reviewing is the first movie that Paramount had let a woman direct since, I think, the 30s. So we picked this French film, Cleo from 5 to 7, which is about a woman who is waiting. It takes place in sort of real time. It's not bound to it. But as far as the words on screen tell you, it is taking place in real time between 5 and 7 p.m. using European time, which I think is neat. As a woman, a very beautiful singer waits to find out if she has cancer and just like how she deals with her day. I had also never seen it, Jake, and I thought it was cool as hell. I really, really liked it. And I thought your letterbox was interesting. Will you share that with us?
Yes, as I was watching the movie, and I really liked it too. I liked it a great deal. But it was reminding me of both Breathless, which I know came out right around the same time, and then Blow Up, the Antonioni movie that came out a little bit later. And it kind of reminded me of both of those movies, but I liked Cleo from 5 to 7 so much more than those movies. And I was kind of hoping that when we discuss it, I could try to hopefully figure out why that is, because they're both very kind of free form, kind of floating through, a particular place sort of movies. But Cleo from 5 to 7, I just think maybe the characters were just so much more interesting and, so much more defined. But that was the vibe that I got from it, was it reminded me of two other movies I liked a lot less.
I think, for one thing, at least from my point of view, having seen one of each of their movies, I think Agnes Varda is a better director than Jean-Luc Godard, who was in Cleo from 5 to 7. That was interesting to see him pop up in a very surreal scene. But they're all buds. Jeff, I know, Jake, I know you've seen it. Jeff, have you seen Nouvelle Vague yet?
No, I haven't. Have you seen it? Both of you?
Yeah. Well, I think it's on Netflix now. But
yeah. Okay. And I've liked it the more I've thought. Like it's aged very well in my mind. I quite liked it.
And that's a movie about the French New Wave, about Godard, and then Varda pops up for a second in the movie. Then you know this because every single person in the movie, their name is put at the bottom of the screen. Because Richard Linklater is a big dork and wants you to know that he knows everyone involved in the French New Wave. And that's fine, because it's kind of like a MCU for film geeks.
Richard Linklater should, start the what is it, FNWU or whatever, French New Wave universe, and have just like now do Truffaut making 400 blows, and now do the do all like the big famous French New Wave movies. Like,
well, what's interesting about that is I think Linklater clearly likes Truffaut more than he likes Godard. Seems to like 400 blows more than he likes Breathless, which it's a better movie, so that's fine. But yeah, he did the same thing in Blue Moon. I'm like, oh, it's the New York theater scene MCU. He just is doing this now. But okay, Cleo from 5 to 7, which I, up to this point, could not stop calling Cleo from 9 to 5. What do you think? Jeff, you've seen it before, and why were you excited to watch it again?
I was excited because I remember really liking it, but not really, it didn't really stick with me, So when I continued to, and I watched this one even longer ago than Daisies. I mean, I don't it wasn't like 20 years ago, but probably more like 15 years ago. And I remember really liking it, more than I liked Daisies by quite a bit. But it, after a few years went by, I'd kind of almost forgotten what happened. I mean, I was kind of like, what? I know she it's almost real time and she's waiting for a medical result, but nothing else had really stuck with me. So I've just been really meaning to revisit it, especially because I feel like it always had a good reputation, but I feel like its reputation has just continued to grow. Agnes Varda had a big bump, because with her, she got an honorary Oscar, just before she died, and then she died, and so she was sort of in the news, and that was 6 years ago. So it's just been a long time coming that I was kind of one, I should watch more Agnes Varda's movies, which I still haven't, and then two, I should revisit Cleo from 5 to 7, which I remember liking, but it's it's just kind of didn't have a lot of staying power in my memory, so I just kind of wanted to check it out now. So I was really excited to see what I would think, especially. And I also actually, another reason I wanted to pick it specifically to talk about with you guys is because we did the Breathless episode. I was on your podcast for Breathless, and this, just like Jake has said already, I mean, my memory was clear from 5 to 7, reminded me of a better Breathless. I mean, that was one of the few things I remember from the first time I saw it. I was like, oh, okay. It's just kind of they're walking. There's a lot of going around Paris, in the early 60s. And that's kind of what Breathless is, most of it. It's just, Jean-Paul Belmondo is just kind of annoying in Breathless. And I remember thinking that, the character in Clear for 5 to 7 was not at all, and being kind of charmed by her. So I was, just kind of thought, well, it'd be great if I went on Never Did It and we got to talk about, the female Breathless, in a way, even though it really, it doesn't remind me when I actually sit down and watch it. I mean, the characters are so different. And I frankly think it's just so much better made. I mean, to maybe start with that as like a comparison to Breathless. I mean, Breathless is like, famous for its energy and it's the style, and Godard basically just throwing rules out the window and just doing whatever he felt like. Whereas I feel like watching this movie, I had forgotten just how capable the filmmaking is. I mean, it just feels like so well put together. Even just at the very beginning, the opening with the tarot cards, and which are in this beautiful color, and the way that they edit that back and forth with the black and white close-ups of Cleo getting the reading and reacting, and then when she starts to wander out onto the street and the music kicks in, and it just feels so like well made. Not to knock Breathless, but I mean the thing about Breathless is that Godard doesn't care that it's not well made. I mean, he's kind of like that's almost the point, And so my brain also lumped those movies together, but because of the French New Wave and a lot of this on location in Paris, and they're just kind of wandering around. But really, like, wow, I just like this right from the get go. I was like, oh man, this is just so much better, and like I'm just with it so much more. So that was probably my my first indication that like this is a much better experience here. So yeah, I thought it was, I like Brad's statement, cool as hell. I mean, I was really like on board. I was like, it's 90 minutes. The character's, she's pretty fascinating because at times you're kind of like, are we even supposed to, like, does Varda even like her? Because she presents her as very vain, but you're never like presented nastily or anything, but you're kind of like, she's very vain. It's a little unclear if she's supposed to be particularly wealthy. I mean, she has like an assistant with her all the time. I don't know. I found it kind of fascinating because I'd forgotten all these details. And so I wasn't really sure what, if Varda was, what her opinion of the character even was, but I was just happy to spend time with her through the 90 minutes. And then, you really start to feel for her as it goes on. And you see how nervous she is. And then my favorite part of the movie is probably when she meets the soldier in the last 20 minutes. Is just very charming. The guy's very charming. Her reaction, the actress, because she didn't do that much, because like Camille Marchand or something.
It's Corinne
Marchand. I remember being quite charmed by her. Was the first time I saw it, but again, I thought she was really good in the movie. But particularly near the end, she really, I think her charisma with that soldier character. I don't know who that actor is, but they really do have a good vibe together. And I think her performance as they're nearing the hospital, it really kind of is something that I thought, oh, she's very beautiful and like she's doing a good job. But like when you get to the end, it's like, wow, this is actually a great performance. And then I looked her up and I was surprised to see she didn't seemingly have a huge career, but she was really quite touching near the end. I thought really impressed and liked it even more the second time around. Now I actually remember what happens because I was so disappointed in myself. It was like 5 years went on. I was like, I don't even remember what that movie was about, but I was really happy to do this again.
I want to react to not being sure about Varda's view of Cleo. The main takeaway I got from it, Cleo's vanity and then her fear and the wealth thing, I think, is the superstitions too. I think it's all insecurity. That's like the driving force of Cleo. She's a singer, but she doesn't think anyone appreciates her music, and she doesn't believe the people who compliment her about her music. At one point, she goes to a cafe and plays her song on a jukebox, and nobody cares because who's listening to the music? They're involved in their lives. Like, she thinks that the life of a musician means people's lives will revolve around her, but no one notices her and no one cares that her song is playing. I'm glad that they spelled that out a little bit, because how would you know that it's her song that's playing if they didn't spell it out a little bit? I thought her apartment was incredible. It was so big and filled with cats. We couldn't get over how many cats kept popping up. It looked like my brain is so 2025 poisoned. I was like, it's Sora, it's AI. These are AI cats that keep popping up everywhere. And then she meets, okay, so the actor who plays the soldier at the end of the movie is Antoine Bousselet. I've seen a lot of Letterboxd reviews that were like, I liked it once the guy showed up. Because the movie does shift. At that point, the movie becomes before sunset, because it's the two of them walking around Paris talking about, love and life and their fear of cancer and things like that, and what it means to, only have this short time together. Linklater clearly loves this movie because he made a trilogy of movies based on the last 20 minutes of this movie. But I thought Cleo was cool too. There was this great part where she sings like live, like for the camera with her two wacky friends who show up to her apartment, one of them with the worst teeth I've ever seen in a film. And there's this great shot where she has one wall that's painted black, but you don't really see it when she's walking around the apartment. But all of a sudden she's framed completely in front of that shot. So it's just her in a black background and she's belting this song. And then it ends and she gets frustrated and she takes her wig off and she becomes basically a different character. You know, her whole demeanor changes, and then she goes and finds her friend to go watch the silent movie with, and finally starts telling people that she's very sick because she won't tell the man she's having an affair with that she's sick. Anyway, I thought that whole transition was amazing, and was the thing that was what really sold me. I'm like, oh, okay, this is what people who love this movie, they're onto something here. And I'm kind of annoyed I waited till I was 41 to see it.
I love that moment too. It's not even the black background. It's not like they cut to it. I think it's like you don't even realize the camera just kind of slowly moving while she's singing, and then suddenly it's just framed where it's just complete black, and then then it turns so that she's facing the camera and singing to the camera. And you can see that she's crying, and it's just quite a moment. I mean, it's really, like I said, it's just impressive. I forgot like how well made this movie is. I mean, it's just like so stylish and impressive throughout. So it's a blast.
I think it's also one of those where as you're watching it, and that's part of it, as you're watching it, it kind of feels like a bunch of vignettes because it's her interacting with different people throughout the day. And it's not until, like, I rated this 4 stars on Letterboxd, and now I'm like, that was underrated. This came together as so much, like much more of a cohesive thing, but you need time. And this is my bad habit. Jake's so much better about this than I am, about like waiting to say what you think about a movie until like a little bit after you've seen the movie. But I'm worried I'll forget stuff.
I love the Before Sunrise connection though too, because that's exactly what I thought of when I was first watching. Like, oh yeah, they're just gonna walk around for a while now. And it's just so sad. Like when they finally get to the end, the conclusion, it's just such a satisfying resolution to to her story. Yeah, this is really just a kind of a remarkable movie, and I too rated it at 4 stars, even after waiting a little bit. But now I think I said this last week, like Forever a Woman, same sort of way. Like I after having talking it out and hearing more about it, it's like, yeah, I probably underrated it a little bit.
What is the line? This movie, there's one more thing I want to talk about. They have like a false ending and then a real ending. I mean, they happen like within a few seconds of each other, but it's after she gets her diagnosis and she accepts, she's accepting that she'll have to go through radiation. So many movies, we mentioned this on our 1950s episode, but so many movies about women being worried about and having cancer. One of them says something so impactful to the other one, and I thought that would be the end. Is it just we have time?
Or are you thinking of when he says, oh, I wish I could be with you? He says, but you are, because he's with her now.
Oh, yeah.
That the one?
Yeah, that's after the diagnosis. What I was thinking of was before the diagnosis. Actually.
Oh, before, yeah.
The time, but you're right. After the diagnosis, they talk about that. You are with me.
They're sitting on the bench, and he says, they're talking about all that stuff, and he says, we have plenty of time. And I thought the movie was going to end right there.
Me too, because they cut to a really wide shot, right? And I'd seen the movie before, and I couldn't remember. Because the whole time, I'm actually curious if you guys felt a little confused, because the whole time I was watching the movie, I was like, you know what? I can't remember. It's been a long time, so I don't feel bad, but I can't remember what the diagnosis is. Like, I really couldn't remember where we were going with this movie. And when it cut to that wide shot, and they were like, I feel like, they've been holding hands, and they're having this thing, and they sit down, and this wide shot on the bench, and they're like, we'll have plenty of time. And then it keeps going. And I was like, oh, because I thought it was the ending. I was like, oh, it's ambiguous. That's why I can't remember. I was absolving myself. I was like, I couldn't remember the diagnosis because we don't find out. And then, of course, that wasn't the end. We do find out,
right? The doctor drives by and gives her diagnosis, and it's you would think this is now a tragic movie, but the doctor seems very positive that they can treat her, and she's like, oh, I'm actually not scared anymore.
2 months. 2 months of chemotherapy.
Right.
We ride as rain.
Yeah. Did anyone else find that a little confusing? Like, first of all, is that like the worst doctor's visit, like test results? Like, he wasn't clear at all. He was basically like, hey, don't worry about it. It'll be treatment. He doesn't like tell her what the result of the test was. He just leans out a car window and he's like, don't worry about it. 2 months of treatment. You'll be fine. And it's like, okay, well, I was kind of like, okay, that's the visit. There's no like, this is the diagnosis. Like, he doesn't say anything.
So 2 things happen there that I found interesting. That she reacts so positively to that. So the issue for her was, again, it's like goes back to, I think, this insecurity, and now she has an answer, so she doesn't have to worry anymore. And he gave her not a diagnosis, but he gave her a plan, so she knows what the next 2 months will look like. The other thing I found really interesting is this movie is called Cleo from 5 to 7, and we don't even get close to 7. When it was 6:15, I'm like, does she die? because this movie is not going to make it to 7 o'clock. So, because
Oh,
I
wait,
knew that there were only
didn't even
50.
realize that. What time was
Yeah.
it when they? Oh,
6:30. The movie like ends at 6:30. So when it was 6:15, I'm like, why won't we get to 6:30? Because I can see how much time is left in the movie. And it turns out that I don't know if that's what they were going for, but it sure made me nervous.
That didn't even occur to
and
me, honestly.
I thought it was interesting to like have your title be a lie. We don't get Cleo
Yeah.
from 5 to 7. We get Cleo from 5 to 6:30.
Well, am I misremembering this, or isn't the last time that, throughout the movie, for people who haven't seen it, there's like they're popping up on the bottom, and it's like Cleo from 5:08 to 5:13, and then and then it'll do another, and it's like chapters, I think. But I can't remember if the last chapter that I remember reading wasn't actually, I don't know if I wrote it down. It wasn't Cleo. Suddenly it was Antoine. I don't know if you guys noticed that.
Interesting.
The
I
last
did not
chapter,
notice that.
they were hanging shit, and suddenly she meets the soldier, and it's like Antoine from like 6, whatever to whatever. I think I'm imagining that. I think it actually switches over to him. It was like, well, that's very creative, and why? I don't know, but it was very neat.
You have to wonder, like, is it meant to be his story then? He certainly takes over, right? He won't shut up. He's very talkative. And I was surprised he won her over. I kind of thought she'd wind up blowing him off, but he charms her enough, and she's vulnerable enough. And also he seems totally innocent. I thought the way they played with the form was really interesting, and I didn't even notice the Antoine caption.
I didn't notice it wasn't 7 o'clock. I didn't even think about it. So,
all right. Well, usually here, what we do is we go over I've been saying this every episode, but usually here what we do is we go over our favorite, in this case, it would be female-led movies, female-directed movies of the decade. But these are the only ones I've seen. There just aren't really enough to do that. So I think that because these movies are both pretty interesting, it would be cool to see where did they land on our lists for those particular years, if y'all are able to do that. Although now I have to change mine because I underrated Cleo from 5 to 7.
The way I would have it right now, Daisies would be near I have about 40 movies. I've got 41 movies on the list, and Daisies would be closer to the bottom, not near the bottom of the list. I've got like Blow Up and Spartacus and Batman and the James Bond You Only Live Twice, and I think Daisies would kind of fit in, kind of right in there, because it's, again, still kind of a hard movie to rate. And I've got Cleo from 5 to 7. I have at number 25, right underneath In Cold Blood, right above Cactus Flower, which is good company, but I still feel like I might have underrated it a little bit.
So I keep separate lists for the 60s. Let me find Daisies because that's less interesting. For 1966, I'd probably slap it. It's interesting. My number one movie of 1966 is a female-driven movie, but it's Ingmar Bergman's Persona. Actually, Daisies would probably be at the end of my list because the movies that I have ranked for 1966 are Persona, The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf, Batman the movie, the Adam West one, Seconds, Blow Up, The Battle of Algiers, and The Fortune Cookie, which are all movies I think are really, really good, and I'm not as confused by them. And then Cleo from 5 to 7 is my number 2 movie of 1962 after Harikiri and ahead of Lawrence of Arabia. So that's where I'm at.
Jake did warn me that we would probably try to do where this fits in our best list of the 60s. And, I frankly, I just don't have a best of the 60s list. So I wish I could join in on this. I was trying to think real quick if I could come up with a, where this might rank, among like French New Wave films I've seen. Not that I've seen that many or have a list in there either, but I would say that, again, a lot of these I haven't seen in a long time, but, I really remember liking like Jules and Jim, Francois Truffaut, but this would be right up there with it, like in my memory. So with, as I don't know where it would rank in my 60s, but I feel like as far as like French New Wave films that I've seen, like I feel like this would be at the top or just at the top with probably 2 or 3 other things. I always like this sort of pre-New Wave movie called Elevator to the Gallows is pretty cool, but it's not usually included. So yeah, I feel like this is probably my favorite French New Wave film if you asked me today. So that's that's sort of a ranking.
Yeah, I think for me too. I mean, I've only seen a handful. I've only seen Breathless, La Dolce Vita. Breathless, Cleo from 5 to 7, The Swimming Pool, La Piscine, which came out, I think like near the tail end there. Like a lot of movies, it's funny. I searched France 60s, and it's giving me like a lot of Italian neo-realist movies. It's pretty annoying because they were, and then like La Jetée, which is cool and influenced 12 Monkeys, but it's a short film. Yeah. But yeah, I think this is my favorite one. That I love the 400 Blows, but I this is more interesting. It's an
Yeah,
easier
I
hang
agree.
too.
You know what else? Actually, and I think he's usually included, but his films to me feel so different, so I didn't even think of him. But Agnes Varda's husband, Jacques Demy, made The Umbrellas of Cherbourg right around the same time, which is perhaps, to me, it does not feel at all like a French New Wave film because it's so different. But if you're including it, then that would be my favorite, and this would be number 2. Power
But
couple.
how much does it influence your feelings on The Umbrellas of Cherbourg that it so heavily influenced Joker Folie à Deux?
I didn't know that, but I haven't seen Joker or its sequel, so it doesn't matter to me at all. So.
Okay, fair enough. I haven't seen The Umbrellas of Cherbourg, but it looks very cool, and I want to check it out.
It's awesome.
All right, so we'll be back next week with a slightly supersized episode as we look at 3 movies directed by women from the 1970s.